current listings, when it comes to CMAs, is it only required when we're setting a price or when we're doing a CMA? Because somewhere in the unit, I think it says that we have to look at properties that have been sold is the most important.
Correct.
So where do current listings then come into play?
So basically, in CMA, you will use sold properties because that's your real number that the property sold for. Active listings could sell for like 100,000 below whatever their asking price is. We don't know what price it will sell for. So our numbers, the CMA, has to be based on real numbers, which means the actual price the property sold for. So that's for the CMA. But when we are having the conversation with the seller in regards to where the price point should be for the listing, that's when we have to look at active listings as well. So we have to look at what other properties are listed in the area so that we can have an understanding of how to price the property compared to those other ones. All right. So for example, let's say the property is very similar to other properties that are listed in the neighborhood, but if the seller goes to the highest price point, now that property is not going to sell because according to Principle of Substitution, if other similar properties are listed for lower price, then the buyer will go to the lower price property if everything else is the same. So this is where positioning the property at a higher price point would actually be damaging to the seller. What will end up happening is if, let's say, there's two properties listed, one is higher, one is lower, and they are very similar to each other, then the higher priced property will actually help sell the lower priced property, right? All of a sudden, the lower priced listing looks very good because, oh, we're getting a deal. All right. So when you're having those conversations around listings with a seller, you want to look at what other properties are listed in the area because that's competition. So you need to know what's going on in the market when pricing a property.
But then the sold property is used for determining the price. But then in order to adjust that price, we also look at the active listings.
Correct. Because what happens is in most cases, whatever the CMA you give the seller, they'll be like, no, my property is worth more.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to have that conversation and say, okay, what's happening in the neighborhood? Just because it's like my husband, he's trying to sell this truck so overpriced. I am like, sell the truck. Right. But no, he's been holding on to this truck that I don't think is worth whatever he wants because he paid more for it, but he bought it during COVID time, right? Everything was exaggerated at that time. And I'm like, just get rid of the truck. But he's kind of stuck on this price. And I asked him, what are other ones listed at, right? Like he's not getting anybody buying the thing. So I'm like, drop the price and sell it. But he's like, no. My truck is worth more. I'm like, okay. So this is the same conversation you'll have with sellers. And they'll be like, no, our house is better. For whatever reason, no, it should be worth more. And as a result of that, right? So you have to have this conversation and say, hey, let's be realistic. If your next door neighbor is selling the property for $50,000 less, what are the chances of your property selling? At the price that you want to list it at. Now, all of a sudden, the neighbor's property looks like a steal. It's like, yay, great deal. Let's buy that one. Now you help sell the other property, right? And then how do you market that property, which is like clearly 50,000 higher because every buyer and every buyer's agent will come to you and say, well, why do you think your property is worth more? Now, how do you justify that? Because they have the same CMA. Right? Unless there's other things that add to the value of that property. Yeah. So this is why we need to look at active listings is because you want to know how does the property compare to other listings on the market currently, because that's what the buyers will be looking at. And actually expired listings. So when I'm having a conversation with a seller about listing their property, I want to look at active listings and expired listings as well, because that can give you some information about, hey, this person listed the property for X amount. It didn't sell, sat on the market for 90 days or 120 days, did not sell. They ended up taking it off, right? So the seller may want to know that information. So I just recently had this conversation with one of our agents. The seller wanted to list the property 100,000 over the market value of the property, right? and they would not budge from that. Our agent did the CMA, and the agent came to me and said, okay, what should I do? I said, well, let them know the pros and cons of overpricing their property, and then if they really insist on listing it, you can have the CMA to have that conversation with them, and also take a look at active listings and expired listings, have all of that information, and then have a conversation. If they still want to list it at that price, okay, you can list it, but know that, like, tell the seller, understand the property may not sell. So of course the property did not sell, and I had basically suggested that the agent also tell their seller, you know what, why don't we kind of reassess the situation in a month, and we may be doing a price drop if we have no interest. So basically they got 0 showings, and then they dropped the property by $50,000 just recently. All right. So this is where having those conversations, and when somebody does want to list the property for more than what it's worth, I would have those conversations and look at what the expired listings are, what the active listings are, and what is likely to happen if they position the property at that price, and then what the next steps would be. Should we get no showings? Should we get no offers? What the next steps should be, or would look like. And I would tell them that we may have to drop the price, so they need to be okay with that, right?